I was 34,000 feet in the air when the plastic snapped. It was not turbulence. It was my corporate card, broken in half by the CEO's wife in front of the entire first-class cabin. She smiled and announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "We just lost $24,800 because of you. Congratulations." She thought the money had vanished. She did not realize that amount of cash leaves a trail straight to her secret. My name is Kylie Foster, and if you asked me to define my life in a single word at 37 years old, that word would be logistics. I am the invisible architecture that keeps the ceiling from collapsing on the heads of very rich, very demanding people. As the manager of travel and vendor operations for Waverly & Rowe, a luxury furniture brand that prides itself on effortless elegance, my job is to ensure that the effort remains entirely hidden. I was sitting in seat 4C, the aisle seat of the first-class cabin, on a flight bound for Scottsdale, Arizona. My laptop was open, the screen glowing with a spreadsheet that contained 314 rows of potential disasters. We were heading into the annual investor summit, the most critical week in the history of the company. We were launching the Orem line, a collection so expensive it made our usual high-end inventory look like discount warehouse stock. Everything depended on this. If the samples did not arrive, if the lighting rig was wrong, if the investors did not have their preferred sparkling water in their suites, the stock price would take a hit. I adjusted my glasses and typed a note in row 42. Check ground transport contracts again. I had spent the last 72 hours awake, fueled by bad airport coffee and pure adrenaline. I was not just a manager, I was the failsafe. I knew the name of the driver picking up the samples. I knew the thread count of the sheets in the CEO's suite. I was the one who made the magic happen while everyone else took the credit. Then the air in the cabin changed. It was not a drop in pressure, it was a shift in power. Serena Vance had boarded. The wife of our CEO, Graham Vance, did not just walk into a room, she curated her entrance. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere set that probably cost more than my car. Her blonde hair falling in a perfect, expensive curtain around her shoulders. Trailing behind her was her personal assistant, a young woman who looked terrified and carried 3 different designer bags. I kept my head down, fingers hovering over the keys, hoping to blend into the upholstery. In the hierarchy of Waverly & Rowe, I was furniture, useful, necessary, but meant to be sat on or ignored. Serena stopped. She did not move to her seat in row 1. She stopped right next to me. I could smell her perfume, something heavy with jasmine and entitlement. I looked up, forcing a polite, professional smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," I said. "We are all set for the arrival in—" She did not let me finish. She turned her head slightly, acknowledging me with eyes that were cold, hard, and terrifyingly focused. It was the look a predator gives to an animal that has wandered into its territory. She held up her phone, the screen unlocked, and beckoned a flight attendant over with a sharp snap of her fingers. "Verify this transaction," Serena said. Her voice was calm, melodic, and loud enough to carry to the economy curtain. The flight attendant looked confused. "Ma'am, I am not sure I understand." "The corporate account," Serena said, pointing a manicured finger at me. "She is the authorized user on the logistics card. Verify the hold." My stomach dropped. I had the company credit card, the heavy, black metal one used for high-level vendor deposits, sitting next to my laptop. I had just used it to confirm the security deposit for the venue. "Mrs. Vance," I started, my voice shaking slightly. "If this is about the venue deposit, Graham approved the—" Serena moved faster than I expected. She reached down, her hand flashing out like a viper strike, and snatched the black card from the tray table. "Hey," I instinctively reached for it, but she pulled back, holding it up like a trophy. $24,800, Serena announced. She was not talking to me anymore. She was performing for the cabin. She looked around, making eye contact with a man across the aisle, then back to the flight attendant. "We just received a fraud alert for $24,800, an unauthorized charge." The silence that followed was absolute. The hum of the engines seemed to vanish. Every head in first class turned. I felt the heat rise up my neck, burning my cheeks. It was a physical blow. That shame, it made my skin prickle. "That is a mistake," I said, my voice rising, desperate to fill the silence. "That is the vendor concierge deposit. I was told to push it through this morning. It is for the summit. You know this." Serena looked at the card in her hand. She did not look at the numbers. She looked at me with a smirk that did not reach her eyes. "I know nothing of the sort. she said. Graham knows nothing of the sort. We have been auditing the accounts. Kylie, we have been watching the bleed. She placed her thumbs on the center of the card. It was metal, reinforced, designed to be durable, but Serena Vance possessed the strength of pure, unadulterated malice. She bent it. The metal groaned. Then the plastic coating snapped with a loud, violent crack. She dropped the two halves onto my keyboard. They clattered against the keys, disrupting my spreadsheet. $24,800 gone, she said. Because of you. Congratulations. I did not steal anything. I stood up then, forgetting the seatbelt sign, forgetting protocol. That charge is for Solstice Executive Services. It was a priority request from the executive office. I have the email chain. Do not act, Serena hissed. Her mask of calm slipped for a second, revealing something ugly underneath. Do not stand there and lie to me. We checked with the venue. They do not use a service called Solstice. That money went to a shell account. My breath hitched. That was impossible. I had processed the invoice myself. It had come from the approved channel. The headers looked right. The logo was correct. That cannot be right, I whispered. The blood was draining from my face. I looked around the cabin. People were staring at me with disgust. To them, I was not the hardworking logistics manager. I was the embezzler, the thief who stole from the beautiful woman in cashmere. Serena turned to her assistant. Give me the form. The assistant scrambled to pull a document from her folder. It was not a standard HR form. It was a liability waiver, drafted on company letterhead. Serena slapped the paper down on top of the broken card. Sign it, she commanded. It is an admission of financial liability. You sign this, and we handle it internally. We garnish your wages. We work out a payment plan. You keep your freedom. I am not signing that, I said, my hands trembling. I did not take that money. I need to call Graham. Graham is already disappointed, Serena said softly, leaning in close so only I could hear. He is heartbroken. Kylie, he trusted you. If you do not sign this, security will be waiting at the gate when we land in Phoenix. Federal charges, wire fraud. Is that what you want for your son? What is his name? Noah. The mention of Noah hit me harder than the accusation. She knew his name. She was weaponizing my 15-year-old son against me in the middle of a flight. I looked at the paper. The words swam before my eyes. I, Kylie Foster, accept full responsibility for unauthorized expenditures totaling $24,800. If I signed, I was admitting guilt. I would be in debt for years. My career would be over. If I did not sign, she would have me arrested in front of the investors at the gate. The humiliation would be total. I looked at Serena. She was waiting, pen in hand, eyes gleaming with victory. But there was something else there too. I had worked in vendor operations for 12 years. I knew how to read people who were bluffing about delivery dates. I knew how to spot a supplier who was hiding a defect. Serena was breathing too fast. Her pupils were dilated. This was not just anger. This was panic. She was not trying to punish me for losing money. A company like Waverly & Rowe burned through $20,000 on floral arrangements without blinking. No, she was desperate to close the loop. She needed me to admit to the charge so no one would look deeper into where that money actually went. She had destroyed the card not to stop me from spending, but to destroy the link to that transaction. I looked down at the broken plastic on my keyboard. The magnetic strip was severed, the chip was crushed, but the numbers were still there. The transaction ID was still in my system. Give me the pen, I said, my voice hollow. Serena smiled, a triumphant, predatory baring of teeth. She thought she had won. She thought she had buried the body. She handed me the pen. I took it, my hand steadying as a cold resolve settled over me. I was trapped at 34,000 feet, but the plane would not stay in the air forever, and when we landed, I was going to find out exactly what Solstice Executive Services was, and why Serena Vance was so terrified of it. I hovered the pen over the paper, feeling the weight of the eyes in the cabin, the judgment, the shame. But beneath the shame, a spark ignited. It was small, but it was hot. It was the anger of someone who had followed the rules for a lifetime only to be broken by someone who thought rules were for other people. I signed, but I did not sign my name. I made a scribble that looked like compliance. There, I said. Are you happy? Ecstatic, Serena said, snatching the paper back. Sit down, Kylie, and try not to cost us any more money before we land. She turned and walked back to her seat, her assistant scurrying behind her, The cabin slowly returned to its activities, the whispers dying down, though the stares remained. I sat back in my seat, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I picked up the two halves of the credit card. I fit them together like puzzle pieces. The name on the front was mine, but the debt belonged to her, and I was going to make sure she paid it back with interest. 12 years ago, I did not fly first class. I did not fly at all. I drove a tan Honda Civic with a cracked radiator and a trunk held shut by bungee cords all the way from Columbus, Ohio, to Phoenix, Arizona. I had $300 in cash, a maxed-out gas station credit card, and a 3-year-old boy named Noah who cried for the first 600 miles and slept for the rest. I left Ohio because I was drowning in the kind of gray, stagnant poverty that eats you alive slowly. I wanted sun. I wanted a place where the horizon looked different. Most of all, I wanted a job that offered health insurance and a paycheck that did not bounce. When I landed the interview at Waverly & Rowe, it was not the international luxury powerhouse it is today. It was a chaotic startup operating out of a repurposed warehouse in the garment district, smelling faintly of sawdust and ambition. I remember my first day. I was wearing a suit I had bought at a thrift store, sweating through the polyester lining in the Arizona heat. I was desperate to prove that a single mother with a high school diploma and a few community college credits could be indispensable. I did not just want a job. I wanted a fortress. I wanted to build a wall of competence so high that the world could never touch Noah again. That was when I met Marjorie Klein. Marjorie was the operations lead back then. She was a chain smoker with skin like tanned leather and a voice that sounded like gravel crunching under tires. She was 60 years old and had survived 4 different corporate buyouts in 3 different industries. She took one look at my eager, terrified face and decided to save me. "Listen to me, Ohio," she had told me in the break room, her eyes narrowing through the smoke of a cigarette she was not supposed to be smoking indoors. "You think this place runs on software. You think it runs on the ERP system the sales guys are always bragging about." "Yes," I had answered uncertainly. "Wrong," she snapped. "It runs on favors. It runs on panic. Do not trust their systems. They do not invest in the back end. They want things fast. They want things cheap. And they want no paper trail when things go sideways. If you want to survive here, you do not become a data entry clerk. You become the person they call when the data is wrong." Marjorie taught me the dark art of vendor relations. She taught me that an invoice is just a piece of paper, but a relationship is currency. "The system is cold," she would say. "People are warm. If you need a custom velvet sofa shipped from Milan to Manhattan in 48 hours, the system will tell you it is impossible. But if you know that Marco in logistics has a daughter starting art school, and you helped him get a scholarship application essay reviewed, Marco will put that sofa on a plane himself." I took that advice and I built a cathedral out of it. For 12 years, I was not just an employee. I was the grease in the gears. I stopped using the automated portals because they were slow and impersonal. Instead, I used my personal cell phone. I built a contact list that was worth more than the company's entire proprietary database. I knew that Tony, the owner of our primary domestic trucking fleet, had a bad back and needed his invoices paid by the second Thursday of the month so he could cover his physical therapy copays. I made sure he got paid, even if I had to walk the check down to accounting myself. In return, Tony never let a Waverly & Rowe shipment sit on a dock. If I called him at midnight, he answered. I knew that Elena, who ran the artisan upholstery workshop in Santa Fe, was terrified of tax season. I helped her organize her receipts one year. Since then, she prioritized our orders over everyone else, including our biggest competitors. I knew the lighting guys, the booth builders, the caterers. They did not work for Waverly & Rowe. They worked for Kylie. This was my safety net. Or so I thought. Graham Vance, the CEO, loved this arrangement. He was a visionary, which is corporate speak for a man who likes to point at a mountain and tell others to climb it while he takes a helicopter to the top. He was charming, handsome in a rugged way, and utterly allergic to details. He would walk past my desk, smelling of expensive cologne and indifference, and drop a bomb on my lap. "Kylie, the fabric for the spring launch is stuck in customs," he would say, not breaking his stride. "Handle it." He never asked how. He never asked if it was legal to call a customs broker on a Sunday, or if I had to promise the freight forwarder tickets to a Suns game to get it released. He just wanted the problem gone. Handle it. It became the mantra of my life. I handled the missing prototypes. I handled the double-booked venues. I handled the tantrums of designers who wanted the moon on a stick. I absorbed the stress so the executives could absorb the champagne. And then there was Serena. When I first started, Serena Vance was just a picture in a silver frame on Graham's desk. She was the trophy younger, taller, blonde, and vaguely famous for being famous in local social circles. She showed up at the Christmas parties, drank 2 glasses of white wine, smiled for the photographers, and left. She was decorative, but 2 years ago, something changed. Waverly and Rowe started hitting the big time. We were featured in major architectural digests. The stock valuation soared, and suddenly, being just the wife wasn't enough for Serena. She wanted a legacy. She wanted power. She started showing up at the office. At first, it was just to redecorate the lobby. Then she wanted to sit in on branding meetings. Then she started offering notes on the logistics of our events. "Why are we using this car service?" she would ask, pointing a manicured nail at my manifest. "It looks so pedestrian." "Because they have a 99% on-time rating and they have never lost a sample." I would explain patiently. "Well, I want us to use LuxRide," she would counter. "Their cars are black matte. It fits the aesthetic." I would try to push back. I would explain that LuxRide was twice the price and had half the reliability. But Graham would just wave his hand. "Just do what she wants, Kylie. Handle it." So I did. I handled Serena's whims the same way I handled a delayed shipment, with quiet efficiency and damage control. I fixed the messes she made. When she ordered the wrong flowers, I had the right ones on standby. When she changed the seating chart an hour before a gala, I smoothed the ruffled feathers of the displaced donors. I thought I was protecting the company. I thought I was protecting my job. I looked out the window of the plane, watching the clouds stretch out like an endless white desert. I thought about Noah, waiting for me back in Phoenix. He was 15 now, lanky and awkward, obsessed with coding and basketball. Every overtime hour I worked, every humiliation I swallowed, was for him. I wanted him to go to college without debt. I wanted him to have the choices I never had. I had spent 12 years making myself invisible. I thought invisibility was a superpower. If you are the person behind the curtain, no one looks at you. You are safe. You are essential, but unseen. But as I replayed the sound of the plastic snapping in Serena's hands, I realized Marjorie Klein had left out one crucial piece of advice. She had taught me how to survive the system, but she hadn't taught me how to survive the people who own it. In the corporate world, invisibility is not armor. It is a target. When things are going well, you are ignored. But when the sky starts falling, when $24,800 goes missing and a scapegoat is needed, the invisible woman is the perfect victim. Because if no one sees what you do, no one will believe you when you say you didn't do it. I closed my eyes, feeling the vibration of the engines in my teeth. I had spent a decade building a foundation of trust with everyone except the people who signed my paycheck. I had made myself the glue that held Waverly and Rowe together, never realizing that to people like Serena and Graham Vance, glue is just something you scrape off your shoe when it gets dirty. I was not the architect. I was not even the furniture. I was just the help, and the help was about to be discarded. The pressure at Waverly and Rowe did not build gradually like a storm front. It arrived all at once, violent and suffocating. We were 4 weeks out from the summit in Scottsdale, the event that was supposed to crown us as the new kings of luxury interiors. The Orem line was not just a furniture collection, it was a gamble. We had accepted $8 million in pre-orders from boutique hotels and private designers who had only seen 3D renders. The timeline was razor thin. If the velvet armchairs did not arrive on time, or if the gold leaf detailing on the tables was chipped, the company would not just lose money, it would lose credibility, which in our industry was the only currency that mattered. I was ready for the stress. I had survived product launches where the shipping containers were lost at sea and managed to get replacements flown in on cargo jets overnight. I knew how to navigate the chaos. What I did not know how to navigate was the betrayal. It happened on a Tuesday morning in the glass-walled conference room that overlooked the Phoenix skyline. Graham called the meeting for 9 a.m. When I walked in, notebook in hand, I saw a stranger sitting in my usual chair. He was a man in his late 30s, wearing a navy suit that was too shiny and brown leather shoes that came to an aggressive point. He had the kind of haircut that cost $300 and a smile that did not involve any actual warmth. "Kylie, come in," Graham said, gesturing to a seat at the far end of the table. "I want you to meet Miles Grant. Miles is joining us as the new Vice President of Global Operations." I froze. Operations was my department. I had built it from a stack of sticky notes into a global logistics network. "I do not understand," I said, remaining standing. I run operations. And you do a fantastic job, Kylie, Graham said, using that dismissive, soothing tone he used on difficult clients. But with the RM line, we are scaling up. We need a strategic vision. Miles comes from a Fortune 500 background. He is a global operations guy. He is going to help us take the next step. Miles stood up and extended a hand. His grip was moist and weak. I have heard great things about your hustle, Kylie. I am really looking forward to optimizing your workflows. Optimizing my workflows. It was the kind of corporate speak that meant absolutely nothing but signaled everything. I was being replaced. So am I being let go? I asked, looking directly at Graham. Of course not, Graham said, looking offended that I would even suggest it. We need you more than ever. You are moving to a senior support role. You will handle the day-to-day execution while Miles handles the strategy and the vendor architecture. You will report to him. I was being demoted. I was being told to train my replacement while doing all the actual work. Also, Graham could tell the board he had hired a heavyweight executive. Over the next 2 weeks, the office became a battlefield. Miles Grant did not know the difference between a freight forwarder and a customs broker, but he knew how to make flowcharts. He spent his days in his office, my old office, creating colorful presentations about synergy and holistic supply chain integration. Meanwhile, he expected me to hand over 12 years of institutional knowledge on a silver platter. Kylie, he said, standing at my cubicle wall one afternoon, holding a tablet. I need the master vendor database. I want to upload it into the new CRM I am proposing. I looked up from my laptop, where I was currently tracking 3 trucks stuck in a snowstorm in Colorado. We do not have a master database. Miles, we have the accounting ledger, which is just names and tax IDs. The rest is manual. He frowned. What do you mean? Manual. Where are the SOPs? Where are the contract tiers? Where is the data stored? It is stored in my head, I said flatly. And in my phone. Graham never approved the budget for a CRM. He said it was a waste of $50,000 a year when I could just call people. Miles looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. That is extremely inefficient. It is basically negligence. How does this company function without data? It functions because I answer my phone at 3 a.m, I snapped. He shook his head. Well, that changes now. I want you to type up a profile for every major vendor, contacts, leverage points, historical pricing, have it on my desk by Friday. He wanted me to digitize my relationships so he could claim them as company assets. He wanted the keys to the kingdom I had built. If it had just been Miles, I might have been able to handle it. I could have outworked him. But Miles had found a powerful ally. Serena Vance adored him. To Serena, Miles was the perfect executive. He used big words, he dressed the part, and most importantly, he never said no to her. When Serena came into the office to discuss the vibe of the summit, Miles would nod enthusiastically and use words like brand elevation and experiential luxury. I became the obstructionist. I was the one pointing out realities, while Miles and Serena lived in a fantasy land. We need to change the hotel for the VIP reception, Serena announced 3 weeks before the event. The current venue feels tired. I want the Royal Palms. We have a signed contract with the Phoenician, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The cancellation fee is $40,000, and the Royal Palms is fully booked. Miles. Serena turned to him, ignoring me. I am sure we can leverage some relationships to make it happen, Miles said smoothly. Kylie, make the call. Let us pivot to something more aligned with Serena's vision. It is not about a pivot, I argued. It is about physics. The rooms do not exist. Just handle it, Kylie, Graham said, walking by the conference room door. He did not even stop to hear the details. So I handled it. I called in favors I had been saving for years. I got the rooms at the Royal Palms by begging the general manager, whose son I had helped get an internship 2 summers ago. I got the cancellation fee waived by promising the other hotel the exclusive contract for our fall retreat. I worked miracles, and Miles took the credit in the weekly email blast. But then the requests started getting strange. It was not just hotel changes, it was specific, high-cost demands that made no operational sense. Serena began emailing Miles directly, copying me only as an afterthought. Need a private luxury Sprinter van for a site visit on Thursday. Use this specific provider. Upgrade the floral budget by $12,000. Use this specific studio. We need a concierge service to handle the gift bags. I have a vendor in mind. Every time I looked at these requests, red flags went up. The prices were double the market rate. The vendors were obscure. Why did we need a concierge to stuff gift bags when we had interns? Why did we need a specific luxury transport service when we had a corporate account with a limo company, Miles? I said, walking into his office with a stack of invoices. These charges are getting out of hand. Who is Solstice Executive Services? Who is Velvet Vine? We have never used them. They require 50% upfront deposits. Miles did not even look up from his phone. Serena vetted them. They are high-touch vendors for the Aurum launch. We are elevating the brand. Kylie, stop thinking like a penny pincher and start thinking like a partner. I am thinking like someone who does not want the audit team to flag us, I said. These invoices have no itemized breakdown. It just says consulting services or logistics support. That is not a valid description. I approve them, Miles said coldly. And Graham approved me. Process the payments. I processed them. I had no choice. I was just senior support. But every time I entered one of those transactions, I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. It felt sloppy. It felt reckless. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I told myself that this was just how rich people operated, burning money to save time, hiring friends of friends to feel important. I told myself to keep my head down, survive the summit, and then start looking for a new job. But the universe has a way of showing you the truth when you are trying hardest to ignore it. 2 days before the flight to Scottsdale, I was working late. The office was empty, the lights dimmed to the emergency setting. I was clearing out my inbox, archiving the hundreds of frantic emails from the last month. A notification popped up on my screen. It was an email from Miles. It was not addressed to me. It was a forward. He must have hit the wrong autocomplete key typing K for Kylie instead of KA for someone else. Or maybe he was just exhausted and careless. The subject line was stark. FW invoice. 4092. Urgent. Do not log this. My finger hovered over the mouse. I knew I should not open it. I knew that in the corporate world, knowing too much was more dangerous than knowing nothing, but I clicked. The email was a thread between Miles and Serena. Serena's message was at the bottom, Miles. The vendor needs the wire tonight. Graham is asking questions about the catering budget. So bury this under the logistics code. Do not log this in the main system yet. Use the discretionary fund. Attached was a PDF invoice for $6,000 from a company called Lumina Variable. I frowned. We did not have a discretionary fund. We had the operating account and the payroll account, and burying a cost under a different code was not creative accounting. It was fraud. I sat there in the dark, the blue light of the monitor washing over my face. I realized then that Miles was not just incompetent, he was a puppet. Serena was using him to bypass the safeguards I had built. She was using his arrogance and his desire to please her to funnel money out of the company, and because I was the one physically processing the payments, because I was the one pressing the send button on the banking portal. My fingerprints were on the gun. I quickly took a screenshot of the email and saved it to a personal USB drive I kept on my keychain. Then I deleted the email from my inbox, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stared at the empty office, the sleek modern furniture, the awards on the wall, the great place to work plaque by the elevator. It was all a facade. Beneath the veneer of luxury, there was rot. I packed up my bag, my hands shaking slightly. I thought about the flight in 2 days. I thought about the card in my wallet, the one Serena would eventually snap in half. I realized she was not just going to escalate her demands. She was going to need a fall guy when the math stopped adding up. I walked out of the building into the cool desert night. I had always thought that if I worked hard enough, if I cared enough, the company would take care of me. But standing in the parking lot, looking up at the illuminated logo of Waverly and Rowe, I finally understood the game. I was not playing to win anymore. I was playing not to go to prison. The remaining hour of the flight was a study in suffocation. I sat in seat 4C, staring at the blank screen of my laptop, while the whisper campaign began. Serena did not yell. She did not make another scene. She simply leaned across the aisle to the elderly couple in row 3, her voice pitched just perfectly to carry back to me. She apologized for the disturbance. She explained, with the weary grace of a martyr, how difficult it was to find trustworthy help these days. She painted a picture of a benevolent family empire being bled dry by the ungrateful staff they had treated like kin. By the time the fasten seatbelt sign pinged for our descent into Phoenix, I was no longer Kylie the logistics manager. I was Kylie the thief. I could feel the eyes of the other passengers on the back of my neck. They were heavy and hot. When the plane taxied to the gate, I stood up to retrieve my bag, and the man across the aisle actually pulled his briefcase closer to his chest, as if I might snatch it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to list every birthday I had remembered, every crisis I had averted, every weekend I had sacrificed. Instead, I kept my mouth shut. I walked off the plane with my head high, clutching the strap of my bag until my knuckles turned white. I expected to see the usual chaotic bustle of the terminal. I expected to see the driver holding a sign with the company logo. Instead, I saw two men in dark gray suits standing at the end of the jet bridge. They were not police. Police have badges and protocols. These men were corporate security. They were the company's muscle, paid to intimidate without technically breaking the law. I recognized one of them. He usually stood guard at the lobby of our headquarters. "Ms. Foster," the taller one said, blocking my path. "Please come with us. We have a private room reserved." "I have a summit to run," I said, though my voice lacked its usual authority. "The investors are landing in 2 hours." "Not anymore," he said. They flanked me, marching me through the terminal like a prisoner. We bypassed the baggage claim and went into a small, sterile conference room usually reserved for VIP travelers. The air conditioning was set to freezing. Graham arrived 10 minutes later. I had worked for Graham Vance for 12 years. I had covered for him when he missed anniversaries. I had lied to clients about his whereabouts when he was hungover. I expected, foolishly, a moment of confusion. I expected him to ask me what was going on. He walked in, looking flustered, his tie slightly askew. He did not look at me. He looked at Serena, who was sitting in the corner, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. "Serena," Graham said, rushing to her side. "Are you all right?" The pilot texted me. Then he turned to me. There was no concern in his eyes, only irritation. "Kylie," he said, his voice tight. "What on earth did you do to make Serena this upset?" I stared at him. The injustice of the question took the wind out of me. "I did nothing," I said. "She broke the company card in half because of a charge I did not make." "Stop it," Serena snapped from her corner. "Just stop lying, it is exhausting." The door opened again, and Miles Grant walked in. He looked energized. This was his element. Crisis management, power plays. He carried a folder, which he placed on the table with a deliberate thud. "I have been on the phone with the finance team," Miles said, looking at Graham, ignoring me completely. "We need to get ahead of this. If the investors catch wind of internal embezzlement right before the launch, the stock will tank. We need to contain the narrative." "Embezzlement," I choked out the word. "Miles, look at the records. I have never taken a dime." "We have to protect the company, Graham," Miles continued, smooth as oil. "I recommend an immediate suspension of Kylie's credentials. We revoke her access to the bank portals, the email servers, and the vendor lists, pending a full investigation, of course." "Do it," Graham said. He waved a hand at me. "Kylie, you understand. We cannot have any shadow over the summit." "I want to see the proof," I said. I stood my ground, though my legs felt like water. "You are accusing me of stealing $24,800. Show me the transaction." Miles sighed, as if I were a toddler asking for a second dessert. He pulled his phone out and tapped the screen, then shoved it in my face. It was a screenshot, not a PDF, not a bank statement, a low-resolution screenshot of a pending charge notification. The vendor name was there, Solstice Executive Services, the amount $24,800, the date yesterday. "I have never heard of this company," I said, looking at the blurry image. "And look at the timestamp. That was processed at 2 p.m. I was in the weekly operations meeting with you. Miles, I was presenting the timeline. How could I have authorized a wire transfer while I was standing at a whiteboard?" Miles pulled the phone back. "Remote access? You could have scheduled it, or you gave your password to someone else. Either way, it is gross negligence." "It is theft," Serena corrected. She stood up and walked over to me. She was wearing heels, making her 3 inches taller than me. She looked down, her face a mask of perfect cold disdain. "You should be grateful we are not calling the police right now," Serena said. "We are giving you a chance to walk away quietly. Sign the admission, pay it back, and maybe we will not ruin your name in this town." "I will not sign it," I said. "Then you are suspended," Graham said, turning his back on me. "Miles, take her badge." I reached into my purse, unclipped my badge, and threw it on the table. It slid across the polished surface and hit Graham's hand. "You are making a mistake," I said. "Not just about the money. The logistics for this summit are in my head. Miles does not know the vendors. He does not know the contracts." Serena laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. "Oh, Please, she said. You place orders. You book flights. Do not delude yourself, Kylie. You are just a ticket booker. Do not think you are important. The words landed like a physical slap. Just a ticket booker. 12 years, late nights, missed school plays, weekends spent soothing the egos of temperamental designers, all of it reduced to ticket booker. I looked at Graham. He was checking his watch. He wanted this to be over so he could go to dinner. Get out of here, Kylie, Graham said. Go home. I walked out of the terminal and into the blinding Arizona sun. I did not take a cab. I called a rideshare. My hands shaking so badly I dropped my phone twice. The ride home was a blur of beige stucco and cactus. I felt hollowed out. I felt like someone had reached inside my chest and pulled out my nervous system. The shame was burning off. Replaced by a cold, heavy dread. I had no job. I had a fraud accusation hanging over my head. I had nothing. When I unlocked the front door of my small rental house in Mesa, the smell of burnt cheese greeted me. Noah was in the kitchen. He was 15, wearing a faded hoodie, trying to make a grilled cheese sandwich on our old stove. He looked up when I walked in, his face lighting up with a mixture of surprise and relief. Mom, he said, I thought you were in Scottsdale. Did the summit get canceled? I looked at him. I looked at the way his wrists stuck out of his sleeves because he was growing too fast. I looked at the cheap laminate counter he was leaning against. For 12 years, I had told myself I was doing this for him. I swallowed the insults, the stress, and the fear because I needed the stability. I needed the paycheck to keep this roof over his head. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I made myself indispensable, we would be safe. But looking at Noah, I realized I had been wrong. There was no safety in a place that could discard me in 10 minutes. There was no stability in a job where the CEO's wife could frame me for a crime to cover her own tracks. I wasn't building a future for Noah. I was modeling how to be a victim. Mom, Noah asked, turning off the stove. Are you okay? You look pale. I walked over and hugged him. I held him tighter than I usually did, burying my face in his shoulder. He smelled like teenage deodorant and bread. I am okay, I lied. I am just tired. Did they make you work overtime again? He asked, pulling back to look at me. You promised you would take Saturday off. I know, I said. Things changed. I went to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the room. I thought about Serena's smile when she snapped the card. I thought about Graham's indifference. I thought about Miles and his blurry screenshot. They expected me to beg. They expected me to spend the next week calling and apologizing, trying to get my senior support job back so I could pay off a debt I didn't owe. They relied on my fear. They relied on the fact that I was a single mother who needed the insurance. But fear has a limit. And today, at 34,000 feet, and then again in that cold conference room, they had pushed me past it. I opened my personal laptop. I did not open the company email portal. I opened a blank document. I did not write a 2-page explanation. I did not list my grievances. I did not remind them of my loyalty. People like Graham and Serena do not read long letters. They only understand power. I typed one sentence. To Graham Vance and Human Resources. Effective immediately. I resign from my position at Waverly and Rowe. I will not accept responsibility for transactions I did not generate. Kylie Foster. I stared at the cursor blinking at the end of the sentence. It felt terrifying. It felt like jumping off a cliff without a parachute. But then I remembered the invoice. Solstice Executive Services. I remembered the fear in Serena's eyes before she covered it with anger. I hit send. I closed the laptop. I walked back into the kitchen where Noah was plating his burnt sandwich. Noah, I said, how about we order pizza tonight, the expensive kind? He looked at me, surprised. Really, is it a special occasion? Yes, I said, a small, real smile finally breaking through the numbness. I just got my life back. The first morning of my unemployment was the quietest morning of my life, for 12 years. My internal clock had been calibrated to the frantic rhythm of Waverly and Rowe. I usually woke up at 5 in the morning, already mentally drafting emails to suppliers in Italy. I usually spent my shower strategizing how to move a 3-ton marble table through a service elevator that was 2 inches too narrow, but this morning, I slept until 7. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table and watched the dust motes dance in the sunlight. It felt illicit. It felt like playing hooky from school, mixed with the vertigo of standing on the edge of a cliff. My phone, however, did not share my sense of peace. It started buzzing at 8 in the morning, It vibrated across the wooden table like an angry insect. I looked at the screen. Miles Grant. I let it ring. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Graham Vance. I flipped the phone face down. By 9 in the morning, the texts started coming in. I did not read them, but I could see the previews popping up. They were frantic. They were demanding. They were the digital screams of a house that was realizing, brick by brick, that its foundation was gone. I was not in the office, but I could see exactly what was happening as if I were a ghost hovering over the open plan layout. I knew that right now. Miles Grant was sitting in my ergonomic chair, staring at a blank calendar. He was looking for the master vendor list he had demanded. He was looking for a neat Excel spreadsheet with names, numbers, and account codes. He was finding out that the list did not exist. The contact for the custom booth builder was not in the shared drive. It was in my personal address book under Saul Booths. Saul was a genius carpenter who lived off the grid in Sedona and only checked his email once a week. The only way to get him to start a rush job was to call his wife's cell phone and ask about her vegetable garden. Miles did not know Saul's wife. Miles did not know about the vegetable garden. So, Miles did what corporate men like him always do. He called the general inquiries hotline listed on the vendor's website. He pressed 1 for English. He waited on hold. And when he finally got through to a receptionist who knew nothing about our urgent timeline, he likely used his VP voice to demand service. I took a sip of my coffee, imagining the result. Saul did not respond well to VP voices. Saul responded to respect. By noon, the dominoes began to fall. The summit was 3 weeks away. In the world of high-end events, 3 weeks is not a timeline. It is a countdown to an explosion. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I did not have saved. But I recognized the area code. It was the freight forwarder in Los Angeles. I let it go to voicemail. I could picture the scene at the warehouse. The samples for the Orem line hand-stitched leather chairs, heavy brass fixtures, fragile glass lighting were sitting on a loading dock. The driver was there, engine idling, burning fuel. He was waiting for the release code. There was no release code in the system. The release code was me calling the dispatch manager, asking about his son's baseball tournament, and verifying that the invoice would be paid on Thursday, not Friday. Without that call, the truck did not move. Miles would be screaming at the logistics coordinator by now. He would be threatening to pull our contract. He would be waving the sheer volume of Waverly and Rowe's business like a club. But here's the thing about the luxury artisan world. It is small. It is built on handshake deals and long memories. These people did not trust Waverly and Rowe. They knew the company was slow to pay. They knew the executives were arrogant. They trusted Kylie. They knew that if I said the check was in the mail, it was in the mail. Without me, the trust evaporated. I ate a sandwich for lunch. It tasted better than any meal I had eaten in a decade, but the silence in the house was starting to feel heavy. The initial rush of freedom was fading, replaced by a gnawing curiosity. I opened my laptop, but I did not log into the company server. I couldn't even if I wanted to. They had revoked my access before I even left the airport. Instead, I logged into my LinkedIn. My inbox was flooded. Kylie, where are you? The new guy is yelling at me about invoices I sent 3 months ago. Kylie, we are holding the lighting rig. No deposit, no load-in. Kylie, are you okay? I heard rumors. Rumors. That word made my stomach turn. I knew how Serena operated. She would not admit that the company was failing because they fired the only person who knew how to run it. She needed a narrative. She needed a villain. I could hear her voice in the boardroom, shrill and defensive. Kylie sabotaged us. She deleted the files. She hid the contacts. This is her revenge for getting caught stealing. It was a classic move. Project your own incompetence onto the person you removed. Around 2 in the afternoon, the tone of the messages changed. It wasn't just confusion anymore. It was legal aggression. One of the vendors, a woman named Elena who ran the linen supply, forwarded me an email she had received from the Waverly and Rowe Finance Department. Dear vendor, per the terms of our agreement, delivery of the requested items is mandatory by Friday. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action for breach of contract. I laughed out loud in my empty kitchen. It was a dark, bitter laugh. There were no contracts. That was the irony. Graham Vance hated legal fees. He hated the time it took to draft formal agreements. For 12 years, he had told me to keep it nimble. He wanted the flexibility to cancel at the last minute without penalty. So, 90% of our vendor agreements were based on email chains and my word. Legal action. Good luck taking a sent from my iPhone email chain to court. to force a craftsman to build a custom booth in 3 days. But then, at 4 in the afternoon, my phone rang again. It was Tony. Tony owned the trucking fleet that moved 80% of our inventory. He was a big man with a louder laugh and a heart of gold. But he did not tolerate nonsense. We had shared photos of our kids. I had sent flowers to his mother's funeral. I stared at the screen. I could ignore Miles. I could ignore Graham. But ignoring Tony felt like a betrayal of the one thing I still had left, my integrity. I slid the green icon across the screen. "Hello? Tony?" I said, my voice raspy from disuse. "Kylie," Tony said. His voice was low, serious. There was no friendly greeting. "You need to tell me what is going on." "I quit, Tony," I said, "or I was pushed out. It is complicated." "It does not sound complicated to them," Tony said. "I just got off the phone with your new guy, Miles, and the CEO's wife." My grip on the phone tightened. "Serena called you. She got on the line when I told Miles I wasn't moving the trucks until past invoices were cleared," Tony said. "She told me that all pending payments are frozen pending a criminal investigation." The air left the room. "What?" "She said you are under investigation for embezzlement," Tony said, his voice heavy. "She said you were padding invoices and kicking money back to phantom vendors. She told me that if I help you, or if I talk to you, I could be named as an accessory." I felt the blood drain from my face. This was not just office politics anymore. This was not just a firing. This was nuclear. Serena was not just trying to cover her tracks. She was actively trying to destroy me to ensure no one would ever believe a word I said. "Tony," I whispered. "You know me. You know I would never." "I know." Tony cut me off. "I told her to go to hell. I told her I have known you for 10 years, and you are the only honest person in that building. That is why I'm calling you. Kylie, they are not just bad-mouthing you. They are building a case. They are calling everyone on the vendor list and telling them you are a thief." Tears pricked my eyes. Hot, angry tears. "Thank you, Tony," I said. I appreciate you telling me." "Fight them, Kylie," Tony said. "Do not let them pin this on you." He hung up. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the house now feeling oppressive, threatening. I had thought I could just walk away. I thought I could take the high road, let the summit fail, and move on. But they were not letting me move on. They were salting the earth. If I applied for another job tomorrow, this rumor would follow me. In the logistics world, reputation is everything. If I was branded an embezzler, I would never work again. I wouldn't be able to pay the rent. I wouldn't be able to send Noah to college. Serena Vance had made a mistake. She had backed a cornered animal into a trap, but she forgot that animals fight back when they have nothing left to lose. I stood up and walked to my bedroom. I reached into the back of my closet and pulled out my heavy laptop bag. I had been locked out of the company email. I had been locked out of the server. But I was the one who bought the laptops. I was the one who set up the original email protocols 10 years ago because our IT guy was part-time and useless. I knew something Miles and Serena did not. I kept a local archive, every Friday, for the last 5 years. I had backed up my Outlook PST file to an external hard drive. It was a habit Marjorie Klein had taught me. Digital paper trails disappear. She had said, hard drives stay in your purse. I plugged the drive into my personal laptop. It took a few minutes to load. The progress bar crawled across the screen, agonizingly slow. I opened the archive. It was a snapshot of my inbox up until last Friday. I went to the search bar. I typed in the number that was burned into my brain. 24,800. Nothing. I tried searching for the vendor name. Solstice. Nothing in my inbox. Nothing in my sent folder. I frowned. If the transaction happened, there had to be a record. Miles had shown me a screenshot. He said it was authorized by me. I sat back, thinking, how would they do it if they used my credentials? They would have had to log in as me. But I had two-factor authentication on my primary login. Unless it wasn't a login, I typed in a new search term, approval. Hundreds of emails popped up. I filtered by date. I looked at the emails from the day of the transaction, and then I saw it. It was in a thread I had never opened. It was in the deleted items folder of the archive. It was an email sent from my account to accounts payable. Subject urgent. Wire approval. Solstice Executive Services Body. Please process the attached invoice immediately for the Summit Logistics. Vendor requires same-day wire. Approved by Kylie Foster. The signature was mine. The font was mine. But the timestamp was Tuesday at 2:15 in the afternoon. I remembered Tuesday. I was in a strategy meeting with Miles. My laptop had been open on the table, connected to the projector. I had stepped out for 5 minutes to take a call from Noah's school nurse. 5 minutes? Miles had been in the room. Serena had been in the building. I opened the metadata of the email. I wasn't an IT expert, but I knew how to read headers. The email hadn't been sent from my laptop. It had been sent from a mobile device. Sent from iPhone. I didn't use the Outlook app on my phone. I hated the interface. I used the native mail client. But there was something else. At the bottom of the email chain, there was a tiny, almost invisible text, a forwarded footer that hadn't been cleaned up properly. Original message. From S. Vance Private, my heart hammered against my ribs. Serena had drafted the email. She had sent it to Miles. Miles had likely accessed my account or used a spoofing tool to make it look like it came from me, then forwarded it to AP. And here was the smoking gun, in the attachment history. The invoice wasn't just a PDF, it was a scan. And on the scan, faintly visible in the corner, was a handwritten note in blue ink. Upgrade plus private ground transport 2 guests. 2 guests. The summit was a corporate event. We didn't pay for guests. We paid for employees and investors. Serena had charged $24,800 to my budget to pay for a private vacation for 2 people. I looked at the date on the invoice. It was for the same weekend as the summit. While the company was launching its most important product, while I was supposed to be running myself ragged in Scottsdale, Serena Vance was planning to disappear with someone, and she had framed me to pay for it. I saved the file, then I copied it to 3 different cloud servers. Okay, I said to the empty room. You want to play legal games? Let's play. The phone rang at 7 in the evening. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the Arizona sky in bruises of purple and red. I knew who it was before I looked at the screen. The silence from my end had finally become louder than their pride. It was Graham. I put the phone on the kitchen counter and pressed speaker. I did not say hello. I just waited. Kylie. His voice sounded thin, stripped of its usual booming confidence. Kylie, are you there? I am here. Graham, I said, chopping vegetables for dinner. I wanted him to hear the rhythmic thud-thud-thud of the knife. I wanted him to know I was living my life while his was falling apart. Look, we need to talk, he said. Things are complicated here. The timeline for the summit is at risk. Miles is finding the transition more challenging than anticipated. Miles does not know the difference between a freight bill and a menu, I said calmly. I assume the samples are still stuck in Los Angeles. There was a pause. I heard a rustle of papers. We can fix this. Kylie, I have been thinking. Maybe we acted too hastily. The stress of the launch got to everyone. I am willing to offer you a new contract. I stopped chopping. A new contract. Director of Operations, Graham said, rushing the words out. A 20% raise, full benefits, a dedicated assistant. You come back tomorrow. You fix the vendor mess. You get the trucks moving, and we put this whole misunderstanding behind us. It was the classic abuser's cycle. Hurt, discard, and then love bomb when the victim is needed. He was offering me everything I had wanted for 5 years, but it tasted like ash. That is a generous offer, I said, but I have one condition. Name it, Graham said. Signing bonus, more vacation. I want the audit trail, I said. My voice was steel. I want the full, unredacted transaction history for the $24,800 charged to my card. I want the IP address of the device that authorized it. I want the full invoice from Solstice Executive Services. And I want a written statement from you acknowledging that I did not make that purchase. The line went dead silent. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then, a different voice cut through the air. It was sharp, cold, and dripping with venom. Absolutely not, I smiled grimly. I knew she was there. Serena never let Graham make a move without pulling the strings. Hello, Serena? I said. I see you are monitoring the call. We are not giving you access to sensitive corporate financial data. Serena snapped. You are a former employee currently under investigation for fraud. You have no standing to demand internal documents. If I am a fraud, I countered, then why is Graham offering me a director title? Because Graham is too soft. Serena hissed. He thinks he can buy you off, but I know what you are doing. You are trying to fish for information to build a lawsuit. You will get nothing. Kylie, you come back and do your job, or we destroy you. I think we are done here, I said. Kylie, wait, Graham started. No, I said. If you want me to save your summit, you have to clear my name first. Prove the money was not stolen by me. Until then, good luck with the launch. I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally saying no. 30 minutes later, there was a pounding on my front door. It was aggressive, frantic knocking. I checked the peephole. It was Miles Grant. He looked nothing like the polished executive who had taken my office 2 weeks ago. His tie was loosened, his hair was a mess, and he had sweat stains under the arms of his expensive shirt. He looked like a man who had been screamed at for 12 hours straight. I opened the door but left the security screen locked. "Kylie," he breathed, leaning against the doorframe. "Thank God. You have to help me." "I do not have to do anything, Miles," I said. "Get off my porch." "Please," he begged. "I just need the list. Just the names and the phone numbers. The lighting guy in Vegas won't take my calls. The caterer said they lost the contract. Just give me the contacts. I will pay you. I will pay you out of my own pocket. $5,000. Cash." I looked at him with genuine pity. He was just a pawn, a well-paid, arrogant pawn, but a pawn nonetheless. "Miles," I said softly, "do you want the list to save the event? Or do you want the list so you can backfill the paperwork to make the fraud accusations stick?" He blinked, startled. "What? No. I just need to get the trucks moving. Serena is going crazy. She is tearing the office apart." "Why is she so worried about Solstice?" I asked. I threw the name out like a grenade. "She is terrified the press will find out about the concierge service," Miles blurted out. "She said if the Solstice invoice leaks, the investors will pull out." I froze. "I never said Solstice was a concierge service. Miles, I just saw a charge on a credit card statement." "How do you know what kind of company they are?" Miles's face went pale. He realized he had walked right into the trap. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He knew that I knew. "You processed it," I said, stepping closer to the screen. "She made you do it. She made you push the wire through, didn't she?" I have to go," Miles stammered. He backed away, nearly tripping over a potted plant. "I cannot be here." He ran to his car, a leased BMW, and sped off into the night. I locked the door. I had confirmation. Miles was involved, but he was weak. He would crack under pressure. But I still needed the physical proof. I needed the invoice that Serena was protecting with her life. I went back to my laptop. I wasn't going to help Waverly and Rowe, but there were innocent people caught in the crossfire. The vendors, the small business owners who were counting on this summit to pay their mortgages. I couldn't leave them in the dark. I started making calls. I called Elena at the upholstery shop first. "Kylie," she answered on the first ring. "Oh, thank goodness. Is it true? Are you really gone?" "I am gone, Elena," I said. "And you need to be careful. Do not ship anything to Waverly and Rowe unless you have cash in hand. No checks, no promises." "I knew it," she sighed. "That woman, the wife, she called me yesterday." "Serena." "Yes," Elena said. "She wanted me to rush a custom order, 4 lounge chairs for a private suite, not for the summit floor, for a VIP holding room," she said. "She told me to bill it to the main event budget, but to ship it to a different address in San Diego." San Diego. I wrote it down on a notepad. "Why San Diego?" "I do not know," Elena said, "but she said to put it on your card. She specifically said, use Kylie's card on file. She handles all the logistics. This was 3 days ago." My blood ran cold. Serena was still doing it. Even after she had fired me, she was using my name as a shield for her off-book spending. "Elena," I said, "did you send an invoice for that?" "I did," she said. "I sent it to the general accounts email this morning." "Can you send it to me?" I asked. "Please, I need to see exactly what she ordered." "Of course," Elena said. "I trust you. Kylie, I do not trust them." I spent the next hour calling every major vendor. The story was the same. Chaos, missed payments, and frantic, last-minute requests from Serena for VIP upgrades that made no sense for a business conference. Then, my email pinged. It was from a contact I hadn't called yet. Marcus, the owner of a high-end black car service we used for executives. Subject FWD invoice. $30.99. Discrepancy. Message. "Kylie, I know you are out, but I'm getting bounce backs from Miles. Can you check this? Serena insisted this be billed to the summit. But the itinerary is weird." I opened the attachment. It was a PDF invoice from Marcus's company, but it was attached to a larger chain that included a forwarded bill from Solstice Executive Services. Serena must have been sloppy. forwarding the whole chain to Marcus to show him what level of service she expected. I zoomed in on the Solstice invoice. It was beautiful. It was damning. Invoice 8821, Client Waverly Rowe, at NK, Foster Service Solstice Platinum Package. And there, in the line items, was the detail that unraveled everything. Item 1. Luxury Suite Reservation, the Del Coronado, San Diego, 3 nights. Item 2. Private ground transport, airport to hotel. Item 3. Concierge fee, 2 guests, guest names S. Vance. J. Chen. I stared at the screen. J. Chen. Graham's name was not J. Chen. The summit was in Scottsdale. The invoice was for San Diego. The summit was for business. This was a romantic getaway. Serena Vance had not broken my credit card because she was angry about money. She had broken it because that $24,800 was the deposit for a weekend with her lover, and she needed a scapegoat to explain the missing cash before her husband looked too closely at the books. She had destroyed my career to hide an affair. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the screen illuminating my face. I felt a cold, hard rage settle in my chest. It was not the fiery anger of the flight. It was the calm, calculated anger of a logistics manager who finally had all the pieces of the puzzle. 2 guests, I whispered to the empty room. Okay, Serena, let us see how Graham handles that. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Graham. I didn't call Miles. I dialed the number for a forensic accountant I had met 5 years ago at a networking event. A woman who specialized in corporate fraud. Hello? A sleepy voice answered. Sarah? I said. I have a job for you, and I have the receipts. The phone call that changed my trajectory did not come from a recruiter, and it did not come from a headhunter. It came on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after I had discovered the invoice with the name J. Chen on it. I was sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of printed bank statements and a half-eaten bagel, mapping out a timeline of Serena Vance's spending. My phone buzzed. Unknown caller. I almost sent it to voicemail, assuming it was another panicked middle manager from Waverly and Rowe trying to beg for a password, but something made me answer. This is Kylie, I said, my voice guarded. Kylie Foster. The voice on the other end was deep, calm, and sounded nothing like the frantic corporate types I was used to. My name is Rowan Mercer. I run a firm called Cinderbridge Partners. Tony from the trucking depot told me you were available, though he used slightly more colorful language to describe why. I sat up straighter. Tony talks too much. Tony says you are the only reason his trucks ever arrived on time. Rowan said. He said you carried an entire logistics network on your back for 12 years and got handed a cardboard box for your trouble. I am calling because I have a problem. Kylie. I am not doing consulting work for Waverly and Rowe, I said quickly. I do not care about Waverly and Rowe. Rowan chuckled. I care about the fact that half the artisan vendors in the Southwest are currently refusing to take new orders because they are terrified of getting stiffed. I run a supply chain management firm that connects ethical manufacturers with high-end brands. We are growing fast, but we are missing a linchpin. I do not need someone who is good at spreadsheets. I can hire a kid out of college for that. I need someone who makes vendors believe they are still human beings. I paused. For a decade, I had been told my value lay in my ability to be invisible. Here was a stranger telling me my value was that I was real. When can we meet? I asked. I drove to the Cinderbridge office an hour later. It was located in a renovated brick building in downtown Phoenix, not a glass tower in Scottsdale. There was no marble in the lobby. There was no intimidating receptionist. The office was an open floor plan with exposed beams and desks that looked like they were actually used for work, not just for show. Rowan met me at the door. He was a man in his 50s wearing jeans and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He shook my hand firmly. Coffee is in the kitchen, he said. The contracts are on the table. We believe in transparency here. If you work for us, you see the books, you see the margins, you see exactly when the vendors get paid. I sat through the interview in a state of mild shock. There were no trick questions. There was no posturing. Rowan introduced me to the team, 6 people who looked tired but happy. They talked about vendor health and sustainable partnerships, words that would have made Miles Grant roll his eyes. We want you as our partnership lead, Rowan said, sliding a folder across the reclaimed wood table. The base salary is about the same as what you were making, maybe a little less cash up front, but we offer equity, you hit your KPIs, you own a piece of the company, and our KPIs are not just about profit, they are about retention. If the people we work with are happy, you get a bonus. I looked at the contract. It was 4 pages long, written in plain English, no hidden clauses, no traps. Why? I asked. You do not even know me. I know the people who trust you, Rowan said. In this business, trust is the only asset that does not depreciate. Do we have a deal? I signed the paper right there. For the first time in 12 years, I signed my name without your hand shaking. The next morning, I started work, and that was when the tide truly began to turn. My first task was to stabilize the Cinderbridge network for the upcoming season. I opened my personal contact list, the one Miles Grant was desperate to get his hands on, and I started dialing. I called Saul, the booth builder. I called the lighting technicians in Vegas. I called the custom glassblowers in Santa Fe. Saul, it is Kylie, I said. I am with a new firm now, Cinderbridge. We have a project for a boutique hotel chain. We need custom millwork. The timeline is reasonable, and we pay 50% upfront, the rest on delivery, net 30 days, guaranteed by contract. Kylie, Saul's voice cracked with relief. You are real. You are not in jail. I am very much free, I said. And Saul, we have a contract this time, a real one. Send it over, Saul said. If you are running it, I am in. I am done with those clowns at Waverly. It happened faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, I had migrated 70% of my primary vendor network to Cinderbridge projects. This was not poaching. Poaching implies stealing something that belongs to someone else, but Waverly and Rowe did not own these vendors. They did not even have valid contracts with most of them. They had relied on the laziness of business as usual and the fear of lost revenue. But now, the vendors had a choice. They could stick with the company that was currently screaming at them and threatening legal action, or they could go with the woman who had asked about their kids for a decade and was now offering them guaranteed payment terms. It was not a hard choice. The impact on Waverly and Rowe was immediate and catastrophic. News travels fast in the industry. By Friday, the trade publications were picking up on the chaos. Luxury giant stumbles Aurum launch in jeopardy as supply chain collapses. Investors started calling Graham, demanding to know why the sample showrooms were empty. Customers who had put down deposits for the new line began asking for refunds when the delivery dates were pushed back by 3 months. The summit, which was supposed to be the coronation of the Vance empire, was turning into a public wake. Serena, naturally, did not take this lying down. She went on the offensive. She posted a long, rambling statement on the company's LinkedIn page, accusing a disgruntled former employee of stealing proprietary data and sabotaging key relationships. She did not name me, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew who she was talking about. She is trying to destroy an American business because she was caught with her hand in the cookie jar. Serena told a local business journal, "It is petty, and it is criminal." I was sitting in the Cinderbridge office when I read the article. My new colleague, a young woman named Maya, looked over my shoulder. "Do you want to respond?" Maya asked. "We can draft a statement." "No," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "I do not have to. I did not have to because the vendors did it for me." Tony was the first. He posted a public comment right under Serena's article. "I run a fleet of 50 trucks. I do not have a contract with Waverly and Rowe because you refused to sign one. I am a free agent. I choose to drive for people who pay their bills and treat my drivers with respect. That is not theft. That is the free market." Then came Saul. "I build booths. I do not build lies. I go where the integrity is." It was a cascade. Dozens of small business owners, people who usually stayed quiet to avoid trouble, stood up. They were tired of being bullied. They were tired of the Serena Vances of the world treating them like serfs. For the first time in my life, I realized that the invisible work I had done was not gone. It had been stored up, like a battery charging for 12 years. And now, it was releasing all that energy at once to protect me. I went home that Friday evening feeling a strange sense of peace. I had a job where I was respected. I had saved my reputation. I had hurt Waverly and Rowe not by attacking them, but simply by existing elsewhere. I cooked dinner for Noah steak and roasted potatoes, paid for with my new signing bonus. We laughed about a movie he had seen. For a few hours, I forgot about the invoices, the fraud, and the broken credit card. But the past has a way of clawing its way back in just when you think you have closed the door. Late that night, after Noah had gone to bed, I opened my personal email to check a tracking number for a Cinderbridge shipment. There was a new message in my inbox. The sender name was blank. The subject line was just a date. October 14th. I frowned. October 14th was the date of the summit. It was also the date on the solstice invoice for the trip to San Diego. I opened the email. There was no text in the body, just a single attachment. It was a PDF of a flight manifest. I leaned closer to the screen. It was not a commercial flight. It was a log from a private charter company, one that Waverly and Rowe used occasionally for Graham, but Graham hadn't flown on October 14th. The passenger manifest listed 2 names, Passenger 1S, Vance, Passenger 2J, Chen, and below the names, there was a handwritten note from the pilot. Scribbled in the margins of the log, PAX requested diversion from San Diego to Cabo San Lucas. Additional fuel charge authorized by S. Vance, Cabo. They hadn't just gone to San Diego, they had left the country. But that wasn't the part that made my heart stop. It was the line at the very bottom of the email, written by the anonymous sender. If you want to know who J. Chen is, look at the consultant list for the rebranding project in 2023, and then look at who Miles Grant used to work for. I stared at the screen. The sender was someone inside, someone who had access to the flight logs and the HR records, someone who was watching Waverly and Rowe burn and had decided to hand me a can of gasoline. I wasn't just fighting Serena anymore. I was unraveling a conspiracy that went deeper than a weekend affair. Chen wasn't just a lover, he was a connection. And if Miles Grant was involved, then this wasn't just about cheating on a husband, this was about corporate espionage. I reached for my phone to call the forensic accountant, but stopped. I needed to see it for myself first. I needed to find the name J. Chen in the public records before I pulled the trigger. I typed the name into a search engine, adding brand consultant and Miles Grant. The first result that popped up was a press release from 3 years ago. Global operations firm Apex Logistics hires Julian Chen as VP of Strategy. Apex Logistics. That was Miles Grant's old firm, the firm he had left to join Waverly and Rowe. My breath caught in my throat. Miles hadn't just been hired to replace me. He had been planted, and Serena Vance was sleeping with the enemy. Okay, I whispered, feeling the adrenaline flood my system again. You want to play dirty? Let's see how Graham likes this. I forwarded the email to my secure drive. The warm glow of the new path was still there, but now it was mixed with the cold steel of justice. I wasn't just going to clear my name, I was going to bring the whole house down. Revenge is not a dish best served cold. It is a dish best served with footnotes, timestamps, and metadata. I did not rush to the police. I did not run to the press. The anonymous email about Julian Chen and the flight logs was a grenade, but I could not just pull the pin and hope for the best. If I threw it wrong, it would blow up in my face. I needed to build a containment chamber around it so that when it detonated, the only people left standing in the blast radius would be me and the truth. I called David, an old friend who worked in compliance for a major investment bank. We met at a diner 3 towns over from Scottsdale, far away from the prying eyes of the luxury circuit. Here is the rule, David said, stirring his black coffee. He looked at the printouts I had slid across the table. You cannot hack. You cannot guess. If you log into a server you are not authorized to access, you go to jail. If you guess a password, you go to jail. You can only use what you can legally prove you have seen or what is publicly available. I have the email from my own archive, I said. And I have the invoice a vendor sent me voluntarily. Good, David said. That is your foundation. Now, you need to layer it. Do not look for the crime. Look for the inconsistency. Corporate fraud is rarely about the money itself. It is about the story they tell to hide the money. Find the holes in the story. I took that advice home and turned my dining room table into a war room. I started with Solstice Executive Services. I did not have a login for their site, and I did not try to find one. Instead, I looked at their digital footprint. It was intentionally small. They did not have a Facebook page. They did not have Yelp reviews. Their website was a single landing page with a logo, a stylized golden sun, and a login field. No phone number, no address. I dug deeper into the business registry. Solstice was registered as a lifestyle management consultancy based in Delaware, but their operating address led to a mail drop in San Diego. I called a hotel concierge I knew in San Diego, a woman named Carmen who knew everything about everyone. Solstice, Carmen lowered her voice when I asked, Stay away from them, Kylie. They are not a vendor. They are a ghost service. What does that mean? It means if a CEO wants to take a mistress to a resort and ensure no photos are taken, they hire Solstice, Carmen explained. If a celebrity needs to go to rehab without the tabloids finding out, they hire Solstice. They book the suites under shell company names. They arrange private transport with tinted windows. They sanitize the bill so it just looks like consulting or logistics. They sell discretion, not travel. I looked at the invoice again. $24,800. It wasn't a deposit for a venue. It was the price of invisibility. Next, I pulled up the public timeline for the Waverly and Rowe Summit preparations. I cross-referenced it with the dates on the Solstice invoice, October 14th through the 16th. According to the company's internal calendar, which I had legally on my phone from before I resigned, Serena Vance was listed as out of office, brand immersion trip, Los Angeles. Graham had told the team she was meeting with potential celebrity collaborators in Hollywood. But the Solstice invoice, combined with the flight log the anonymous source had sent, put her in Cabo San Lucas. And she wasn't with a celebrity. She was with Julian Chen. I needed one more nail for the coffin. It arrived 2 days later in the form of a padded envelope in my mailbox. There was no return address. Inside was a thumb drive and a handwritten note. I heard they tried to pin it on you. I was the junior accountant they fired in July for asking why we were buying so many spa gift cards. Look at the miscellaneous code. I plugged the drive into my laptop. It contained spreadsheets. Month after month of expense reports from the marketing department, Serena's domain. I started searching for the pattern. It wasn't just the $24,000. That was just the charge that got caught because it was too big to hide. There were dozens of smaller charges. $3,000 for catering tasting on a Tuesday night when no tasting was scheduled. $2,000 for sample transport that coincided with a weekend Serena spent in Napa. $500 for office supplies that was actually a charge at a high-end lingerie boutique. Every single one of them was coded to my department, travel and vendor ops. I sat back, feeling a cold chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Serena hadn't just panicked on the plane. This had been her system for months, maybe years. She had been using my budget, which was massive, fluctuating, and difficult to audit, as her personal piggy bank. She knew that I was efficient. She knew that Graham told me to just handle it. She counted on the fact that I would absorb the costs to keep the peace. I was not just the logistics manager. I was the unknowingly complicit financier of her affair. And when the Solstice charge came through and threatened to expose the whole house of cards, she decided to snap the card and snap my neck to sever the connection. She thought she was cutting a loose thread. She didn't realize she was pulling the pin on a grenade. I spent the next 3 days assembling the dossier. I did not write it like a victim. I wrote it like an auditor. Exhibit A, the Solstice invoice, verified by vendor. Exhibit B, the flight manifest, contradicting official company schedule. Exhibit C, the pattern of misallocated funds, corroborated by former accounting staff. Exhibit D, the connection between Miles Grant and Julian Chen, conflict of interest. I did not send it to Graham. Graham was compromised. He would bury it to save his marriage or his pride. I sent copies to the chairman of the board. I sent copies to the external audit firm that was currently reviewing the company's financials for the investors. I sent a copy to the head of legal. I used a courier service. I required a signature upon delivery. And then, I went silent. I did not post on social media. I did not text my old coworkers. I woke up every morning, made breakfast for Noah, and went to work at Cinderbridge. I spent my days helping Saul organize his workshop and setting up new contracts for the lighting crew. I laughed with Rowan during lunch. I acted like a woman who had moved on. I acted like a woman who was defeated. I wanted Serena to feel safe. I wanted her to think that her threat on the plane had worked. I wanted her to believe that she had successfully crushed the ticket booker and that the danger had passed. Arrogance is a powerful anesthetic. It makes you numb to the knife until it is already in your ribs. A week passed, then 2. The summit was only 5 days away. The rumors in the industry were that Waverly and Rowe were scrambling but managing to hold it together. Miles had thrown enough money at the problem to get some vendors back, though at triple the price. I was sitting at my desk at Cinderbridge, reviewing a contract for a hotel renovation, when my personal phone buzzed. It was a text message from Serena Vance. I stared at the name. My heart gave a single, hard thump. You think you are clever stealing our vendors? You are pathetic. Keep your mouth shut about company business or I will make sure you never work in this country again. You do not understand who you are messing with. I read the text twice. It was classic Serena, bullying, threatening, and terrified. She must have heard that I was working with Cinderbridge. She thought my revenge was just stealing business. She had no idea what was sitting on the chairman's desk. I did not reply. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was not Serena. It was a Washington DOC area code. I answered. Ms. Foster. A woman's voice. Crisp, professional, authoritative. Speaking. This is Catherine Sterling. I am the chair of the audit committee for the board of directors of Waverly and Rowe. I put my pen down. Hello, Ms. Sterling. We received your package, she said. Her voice gave nothing away. We are convening an emergency session of the board this evening. We are formally requesting your presence. I am not an employee of Waverly and Rowe, I said calmly. I am under no obligation to attend. We know, she said. However, given the nature of the evidence you provided and the implications for the upcoming IPO, we believe it is in your best interest to be there. We are sending a car for you. It will be there in an hour. I have my own car, I said. I will drive myself. Very well, she said. 6 o'clock. The executive boardroom. Come to the side entrance. Security has been notified. I hung up the phone. I looked around the Cinderbridge office. The sunlight was streaming in through the brick archways. It was a good place. A safe place. I could have stayed there. I could have let them burn on their own. But looking at Serena's text message again, you do not understand who you are messing with. I realized that walking away wasn't enough. She had tried to take my livelihood. She had tried to take my reputation. She had threatened my son's future by trying to saddle me with a criminal record. I picked up my purse. I walked over to Rowan's office. I have to leave early, I said. Rowan looked up. Seeing the expression on my face, he didn't ask for details. He just nodded. Go, he said. Do what you have to do. I walked out to my car. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't look like the tired, frantic woman who had been dragged off a plane 3 weeks ago. I looked like a woman who was done handling things for other people. I started the engine. It was time to handle Serena Vance. The executive boardroom at Waverly and Rowe was designed to intimidate. It was a cavernous space on the 45th floor, dominated by a table made of a single slab of imported walnut that probably cost more than my house. I had been in this room dozens of times to serve coffee or set up projectors. I had never sat in one of the leather chairs. Today, I sat at the head of the table, directly opposite Catherine Sterling. The room was silent, save for the hum of the climate control. Graham Vance sat to my right. He looked like a man who had not slept in a week. His usually perfect tan looked sallow, and his tie was loosened at the collar. Serena sat next to him, her posture rigid, her face a mask of porcelain indifference. This is highly irregular, Graham said, his voice echoing slightly in the large room. He looked at Catherine, not me. I understand the board is concerned about the rumors, but bringing a disgruntled former employee into a closed session, it is unprofessional. Kylie Foster was let go for cause. She has a personal vendetta against my wife and this company. He was sticking to the script. He was trying to minimize me, to make me sound like a hysterical woman with an axe to grind. This is not a rumor, Graham, Catherine Sterling said. She was a woman of 60 with hair like steel wool and eyes that did not blink. She tapped a finger on the leather folder in front of her. This is a forensic audit, and Ms. Foster is here because she provided the roadmap. She forged it, Serena said. Her voice was calm, but there was a tremor in her hands that she tried to hide by clasping them on the table. She is a ticket booker who got caught stealing $24,800. Now she is trying to drag us down with her. I did not raise my voice. I did not look at Serena. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I slid it across the polished walnut toward Catherine. That is a time-stamped log from the building's security system, I said. It shows that on Tuesday, October 3rd, from 1 in the afternoon until 4 in the afternoon, I was physically present in Conference Room B for the quarterly safety review. I swiped my badge to get in. I did not swipe out for 3 hours. I paused, letting the data sink in. The wire transfer to Solstice Executive Services was initiated at 2:15 in the afternoon, I continued. It was authorized from a device that was not on the company network, unless I can be in 2 places at once, or unless I can telepathically control an external server while presenting safety protocols to the HR director. I did not make that transfer. Catherine picked up the paper. She looked at it, then looked at the auditor sitting next to her. The auditor, a man named David, who looked like he enjoyed bad news, nodded. We verified the security logs, David said. Ms. Foster has a solid alibi, but we tracked the authorization code used for the wire. Graham sighed, rubbing his temples. If someone hacked her password, it was not Ms. Foster's password, David interrupted. The room went deadly quiet. The wire was authorized using a relentless override code, David said. It is a master key used to bypass the standard two-tier approval process for urgent executive expenses. That code belongs to you. Graham. Graham's head snapped up. What? I did not authorize that, Graham said, his voice rising. I have never heard of Solstice. I did not. He stopped. He looked at the iPad in front of him, where David had displayed the digital signature. He looked at the date. Then, slowly, painfully, he turned his head to look at his wife. Serena, Graham said, you have my passwords. You keep them in your digital vault in case of emergencies. Serena did not look at him. She stared straight ahead at the abstract painting on the wall. Do not be ridiculous. Graham, Miles Grant has access to everything. He must have stolen the code. We will get to Mr. Grant in a moment, Catherine said sharply. But first, we need to address where the money went, because it did not stay with Solstice. David tapped his screen again. A new flowchart appeared on the large monitor at the end of the room. Solstice Executive Services took a 15% fee, David explained. The remaining $21,000 was transferred to a holding company called Blue Horizon LLC. We ran a search on Blue Horizon. It is a shell entity used to manage short-term luxury rentals. David pressed a button. A rental agreement appeared on the screen. This is for a private villa in Cabo San Lucas, David said. 3 nights, October 14th through the 16th, full staff, private chef. So, Serena scoffed, we entertain clients. It was a business expense. The rental agreement lists 2 occupants, David said. One is S. Vance, the other is listed as the primary guarantor for the property damage deposit. The name on the screen was highlighted in yellow. Julian Chen. Graham stared at the name. He blinked, as if trying to clear a smudge from his vision. Julian Chen, Graham whispered. The brand consultant. The guy Miles brought in to help with the Aurum launch. The same, David said. We did a little digging into Mr. Chen's background. He is not just a consultant. He is the former VP of strategy at Apex Logistics. He is also the person who recommended Miles Grant for his current position. I watched Graham's face. I saw the exact moment the realization hit him. It wasn't just the affair. Men like Graham could handle affairs. They understood infidelity. What he couldn't handle was the incompetence. You let him change the vendors, Graham said, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. All those last-minute changes, the concierge services, the new transport companies, you were not trying to elevate the brand. You were funneling business to his friends. Serena finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were hard, unrepentant. I was trying to make this company modern, she spat. You and your little ticket booker here were running things like it was 1990. Julian has vision. He has connections. He is a con artist, Graham shouted, slamming his hand on the table. And you paid for his vacation with my company's money. You used my override code to fund your affair. I did what I had to do, Serena shouted back. Do you think I wanted to be stuck in economy class budgeting? I am the face of this brand I deserve. Enough, Catherine Sterling said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the shouting like a guillotine blade. She stood up. She looked at Graham with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. Graham, this board has a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders, Catherine said. We are 3 weeks away from an IPO. We cannot go to market with a CEO who allows his spouse to embezzle funds and manipulate the supply chain for personal gain. Catherine, please, Graham pleaded. I didn't know. I was a victim here too. You were negligent, Catherine said. You gave her the codes. You gave her the power. And when Ms. Foster tried to warn you, when she tried to do her job, you fired her to protect your wife. Catherine turned to the other board members. They all nodded in unison. The decision had been made before I even walked into the room. Graham Vance, Catherine said formally, effective immediately, you are placed on administrative leave pending a full internal investigation into conflict of interest and financial controls. You will surrender your company devices and your badge before you leave this building. Graham slumped in his chair. He looked small. The visionary CEO was gone, replaced by a man who had lost everything because he refused to pay attention to the details. And Mrs. Vance, Catherine continued, turning her cold gaze to Serena. You are not an employee, so we cannot fire you, but we can ban you. You are hereby barred from all Waverly and Row properties. Your access to all corporate accounts is terminated. Our legal team is currently drafting a civil suit to recover the misappropriated funds, including the $24,800 you attempted to pin on Ms. Foster. Serena stood up. She smoothed her skirt. She did not look destroyed. She looked like a viper that had been cornered but still had venom left. You cannot ban me, Serena said. I am the brand. The Orem line is my vision. The Orem line is a logistical nightmare that is currently costing us millions, Catherine said. Security will escort you out. 2 guards stepped forward from the shadows near the door. The same guards who had marched me through the airport terminal 3 weeks ago. Serena looked at them. Then she looked at Graham. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He was staring at his hands. She grabbed her purse. She walked toward the door, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She held her head high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. As she passed my chair, she stopped. The guards tensed, but she didn't move toward me. She just leaned down, her face inches from mine. I could smell her perfumed jasmine and something bitter. You think you are smart, she whispered, her voice low enough that only I could hear. You think because you brought some receipts, you won. I looked her in the eye. I didn't blink. I did not want to win. Serena, I just wanted my name back, she smiled. It was a terrifying, broken smile. You got your name back, she said. But you humiliated me. You took my company. You took my husband. She paused, and the air between us seemed to drop 10 degrees. You won today. Ticket booker, she hissed. But do you really think that $24,800 is all there is? You only found the sloppy mistake. You haven't found the real money yet. She pulled back, her eyes gleaming with a dark secret. Check the Hong Kong accounts. Kylie, she said loud enough for the board to hear this time. Ask Graham about the raw material imports from 2 years ago. If I go down, I am taking the whole legacy with me. She turned and walked out the door, the guards trailing behind her. I sat there, frozen. The board members were looking at Graham with renewed horror. Graham's face had gone the color of ash. I had thought I was closing the book on a simple case of embezzlement, but as the door clicked shut behind Serena, I realized she hadn't just admitted defeat. She had just opened a trapdoor that led straight to hell. The silence in the boardroom after Serena Vance left was heavy enough to crush a man, and judging by the way Graham was slumped in his chair, it had done exactly that. He looked like a building that had been demolished from the inside out. Catherine Sterling did not look at him. She looked at the auditors. Check the Hong Kong accounts, Catherine ordered, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. Pull the import logs from 2023, now. I could have left. My part was done. I had proven my innocence regarding the solstice invoice, but I stayed. I stayed because I needed to see the full scope of the monster that had been living in the shadows of my department for years. We spent the next 6 hours in that room, the auditors, fueled by lukewarm coffee and professional horror, dug into the digital archives. What they found was not just a discrepancy, it was a hemorrhage. Serena had not just been skimming money for a weekend in Cabo. That was just the sloppy mistake of a woman who had gotten too comfortable. The Hong Kong accounts revealed a systematic inflation of shipping costs for every container of silk or velvet imported for the Orem line. Serena had added a consulting surcharge of 5 to 7%. The money was funneled into an offshore account listed under her maiden name. It is not $24,800, the auditor said, his face pale as he looked at the final tally on the screen. It is closer to $450,000 over 18 months. Graham made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. He had been worried about a credit card charge, while his wife was building a private empire right under his nose. The fallout was swift, and it was brutal. By the next morning, the news had leaked. You cannot keep a secret like that when half the board is calling their lawyers. The headline on the industry news site was Stark, Waverly and Rowe implodes, IPO. Halted amidst executive embezzlement scandal. The summit, the event that was supposed to save the company, was cancelled. The investors who had been on the fence fled like rats from a sinking ship. The stock valuation plummeted so fast that trading had to be suspended. Serena Vance had spent years curating an image of effortless perfection. She wanted to be known as a tastemaker, a visionary. Instead, she became the face of corporate greed. Her name was trending online, but not for her design choices. People were dissecting her consulting fees and her private jet trips. The public humiliation she had tried to inflict on me at 34,000 feet had boomeranged back to her with the force of a hurricane. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Graham. Kylie, he said. He sounded drunk, or maybe just exhausted beyond measure. Please, you have to put out a statement. A statement, I asked, sitting on my porch, watching the sun set over the desert. I already gave my statement to the board. No, to the press, Graham begged. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them it was an accounting error. If you say it, they might believe it. You are the only one with credibility left. I can offer you money, a settlement, double what you asked for. I listened to the desperation in his voice. This was a man who had told me to handle it for 12 years. He wanted me to handle this too. He wanted me to mop up the blood so he could pretend he hadn't been stabbed. I am sorry, Graham, I said, but I do not sell lies. I will only speak the truth, and the truth is already out there. She is ruining me, Graham whispered. She destroyed everything. No, Graham, I said softly. You destroyed it when you decided that keeping your wife happy was more important than keeping your company honest. I hung up. An hour later, the other shoe dropped. My phone buzzed with a number I had deleted but would never forget. Serena. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but a part of me, the part that had stood in that airplane aisle burning with shame, needed to hear her voice one last time. What do you want, Serena? You have to tell them, she said. Her voice was brittle, cracking at the edges. You have to tell the auditors that the Hong Kong accounts were for legitimate sourcing. You were the logistics manager. You can sign an affidavit saying you approved the surcharges. But I did not approve them, I said. You hid them. I am losing my friends. Kylie, she said, her voice rising into a panic. The country club revoked my membership. My foundation board asked me to resign. They are treating me like a criminal. You are a criminal, I said. You stole $500,000. I did it for the brand, she screamed. I did it to maintain the lifestyle that makes the brand valuable. You do not understand. You are just a worker. You do not understand what it takes to be me. You are right, I said. I do not understand, because I pay for my own life. Please, she sobbed. It was a jarring sound. The Ice Queen was melting into a puddle of dirty water. Just help me. I can make it worth your while. We can blame Miles. We can say Miles tricked us both. I am not going to help you, Serena, I said. I am not breaking you. I am simply refusing to cover for you anymore. There is a difference. I ended the call, and then I blocked the number. The final twist came from the most unlikely source, Miles Grant. Seeing the ship going down and realizing there were no lifeboats left, decided to save himself. He walked into the district attorney's office the next day with his laptop. He didn't just have the emails about the invoices. He had a folder titled Insurance. It turned out Miles had been recording his calls with Serena for months. He handed over a recording from the morning of the flight. On the tape, Serena's voice was clear. I'm going to make a scene on the plane. I will snap her card. It will look like she is incompetent and reckless. Once she is fired for the card issue, no one will look at the ledger for the other charges. We need a distraction. Miles, Kylie is the distraction. That recording was the final nail. It proved intent. It proved malice. It proved that my humiliation wasn't an accident. It was a premeditated strategy to frame me. 3 weeks later, I sat in a much smaller, much friendlier conference room at Cinderbridge Partners. A courier had just delivered a letter from the board of directors of Waverly & Rowe. It was formal, it was dry, but it was everything I needed. Dear Ms. Foster, following an independent investigation, Waverly & Rowe formally retracts all accusations of financial impropriety against you. We acknowledge that the termination of your employment was based on false evidence provided by third parties. Enclosed is a settlement agreement for wrongful termination and defamation of character in the amount of $350,000. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Catherine Sterling, Chair. I handed the letter to Rowan. He whistled low. $350,000, Rowan said. That is a lot of college tuition. It is, I agreed, but the letter is worth more. I looked out the window. The Phoenix sky was a brilliant, endless blue. I wasn't just a survivor of Waverly & Rowe anymore. I was a partner at Cinderbridge. We had just signed 3 new major clients vendors who had left Waverly to follow me. That evening, I took Noah to the nicest steakhouse in the city. We ordered appetizers. We ordered dessert. Mom, Noah said, looking at me across the candlelit table. You look different. Different how? I asked. You look... Not tired, he said. You look like you are actually here, not thinking about a shipping container somewhere. I smiled. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I am here, Noah, I said. I am finally here. I thought about the moment on the plane, the snap of the plastic, the eyes of the strangers, the feeling of being small, of being owned. For 12 years, I had thought that being strong meant enduring. I thought that if I could just take enough punishment, if I could just handle enough crises, I would be safe. I was wrong. Serena Vance did me a favor when she snapped that card. She didn't just break a piece of plastic. She broke the illusion that I needed their permission to exist. She broke the chains I had forged for myself out of fear and a desire for stability. I paid the check with my own debit card. It didn't have a corporate logo on it. It didn't have a limit set by a CEO. It was mine. We walked out into the cool night air. I took a deep breath, tasting the sage and the dust. I was Kylie Foster. I was a mother. I was a partner. And for the first time in a long time, I was the one steering the ship. And as for Serena, I heard she is currently consulting for her defense attorney. I hope she handles it well. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a wild ride from 34,000 feet to the boardroom, and I really appreciate you sticking with Kylie until the very end. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your office, your car, or maybe while you are cooking dinner like Kylie? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading about where our community is around the world. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please make sure to subscribe to Boss Revenge Stories. Hit that like button to let us know you want more stories like this, and smash that hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who need a little satisfaction in their day. See you in the next story.